So if you invert it into, rather than a failure or you're not doing this, you need to do X, Y, Z, but rather, hey, there's an opportunity for you to do more of, an opportunity to do X differently, that's way more motivating. That's way more engaging for you and your team. That's how you're going to get the difference out of someone and yourself as well.
So in your experience, how hard is it to get people to see themselves as they actually are rather than as they think they need to appear to be?
So if you think of it like a coin purse that you start every day with, and every task that you do takes a certain number of coins. So by the end of the day, you've maybe spent everything. I got made redundant, which I was in HR at the time, so I had to write my own letter, which is a humbling moment. Having to go through all of that and really look at how much my mindset and my confidence was broken. There are some very interesting studies, and one which is, it's very unethical. It was done back in the 1930s. Have you ever heard of the monster study? Oh, that is a fabulous question.
Beth Hope, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. So, we always start off the podcast the same way. Who are you and what problem do you solve?
Great. So I'm Beth Hope. I'm an executive coach, which basically means that I help ambitious leaders who are doing great and thriving get even better. So I love the fact that you ask about the problem side of things, because I think it helps clear up a little maybe misconception about coaching and what it is and isn't. So coaching isn't about you being broken or needing to fix something. Coaching is really this catalyst and this tool for your growth and clarity and moving forward with intentional action. So you're doing good, maybe even great, fab. Let's be exceptional. Let's elevate. Let's get to that new level. And that's a little summary about me.
Nice. Okay. So then let's say I'm a potential patient and you're the doctor. What symptoms might I be experiencing that make it worthwhile staying tuned for the rest of the conversation?
Fab. And I'm glad you asked this because, my parents are doctors, so I've kind of grown up in this good old medical world. So I think rather than, let's say, you having aches and pains, maybe there's a small niggle that we could work out. Maybe it's around peaking that performance. So if you think around athletes, for example, like Usain Bolt, he's got a coach. He's not got a coach because he can't run. He's got a coach to shave off those few seconds. And the same with any top athlete. So it's more around that side. You've come to me so you can really improve that performance, shave off those seconds, and feel even better and more authentic is a lot around what I do. So more authentic, more fulfilled, and taking that time for yourself rather than just getting caught up in that busy day to day.
I love that. I think about, we obviously, we interview, we hire a lot of different people. And one of the things that I think about when you were talking there, Beth, is some people are coachable and some people are probably not so coachable. So for some people that are not so coachable, I guess let's go deep with it first. Like what's your take on being coachable and not being coachable? What's your feeling around that?
I think it's about expectation. Everyone is coachable if they're ready for it. So coaching it's not up to me as your coach, for example, to tell you what to do, pull you here, push you there, advise you. That is not coaching. As your coach, I'm here to walk beside you, to challenge you, to help you maybe listen to yourself potentially for the first time, because it's amazing how often we do not take time to actually listen to what we're really feeling, those patterns in speech that we keep having, those limiting beliefs. And so that's my role, is to hold that space, reflect, challenge. Now, I know I've definitely made the mistake in the past, and I will hold my hands up to my own learnings of working with a client who was not in a space where they were ready to be coached. They wanted advice, they wanted mentoring. And in my gut, I knew that. But I still took it. I was like, okay, we can, make the best. Let's really align expectations. And that didn't work. And that was a really good moment for me to be like, right, trust your instinct really make sure that you have, I always offer an initial complimentary call to discuss what is it that you're looking from coaching? What do you understand by coaching? How would we partner together in order to achieve that? And am I the right coach for you? Completely fine. If I'm not, great. But maybe coaching is still the right avenue. And you've got to align those expectations from the beginning. And sometimes realign them halfway through the coaching contract, or again, never be afraid to bring in that clear communication.
You said something really interesting there. So when I think about coaching, typically my mind goes to a noughties American film about basketball and a bit of tough love and sitting on the sidelines and all those things. So tough love is probably maybe a tool within a coach's arsenal. I don't know, maybe we can touch on that. But you were talking about mentorship. So coaching and mentorship for some schmuck like me, I'd be sat in the corner saying, well, it's probably the same thing. So where do you have to be in your life to say, actually, I need a mentor, or actually, I need a coach? What are the big differences?
Great question, because I think this is such a misconception. And so mentoring and coaching, fabulous, both have their spaces, and many people and many coaches do both within their businesses, for example. Now, mentoring is more around advice and sort of, this is my experience and this is how I did it, so maybe you're on the same path with me. So let's say, for example, that you wanted to retrain as a coach. So this is something I've had with people before. They reach out and go, hey, I want to get into coaching. What do I do? Now that would be more mentoring. I'd tell you about my journey, how I went about things, what I've done. And then I could look at, we'd discuss your life, what kind of, let's say, coaching education appeals to you, and kind of talk through that way. That would be mentoring. Now, if you come to me and you say, do you know what, Beth, I'm at a crossroads. I don't know what fulfillment is. Maybe I'm looking for a new career. Maybe it's coaching, maybe it's not. Okay. Then we'd go into exploration. So in that conversation, as your coach, not your mentor, I would be asking open-ended questions about fulfillment. Let's do some fun exercises, bring out some flashcards, lots of different tools that I've got. But it's exploration in your space. We're not in my space. Does that help clarify things?
He's got it. He's nodding along. I think he's got it.
Hopefully.
Right, okay, so let's move on to, I want to talk about confidence. So I want to talk about the difference between authentic confidence and rehearsed confidence. So what can you tell us?
Yeah, so I am all about authentic confidence. The kind of antithesis to fake it till you make it. I hate that. I don't think it does anyone any favors. So authentic confidence, for me, is all around aligning with your values. So understanding what your true values actually are. Let's say core values of around 3, and living through those. So, for example, I think a real misconception, well, there are sort of 2 misconceptions about confidence. One is you either have it or you don't. So you're either a confident person or you're not. And that's binary. And no, confidence is more like a muscle. So it's something you can grow, you can build through tools, through gratitude, through mindset, through practice. All of that is building confidence. And I think the second is that confidence is loud and never having fear and always speaking up and walking into a room and being like, hey, I'm here. That is not necessarily confidence. I work with many leaders who are maybe of a more introverted preference, who are not the big, jazz hands, brass band type person, and who would actively really feel uncomfortable being that. Great. Let's bring out who you are and really work with that. So also part of the work I do with leaders is understanding that within their teams, that their teams are made up of many different people, and maybe they think, oh, Zach isn't as confident as Jack, or Jack's not as confident as Zach. No, they both authentically can be confident, but it's also about being comfortable knowing what you need, being able to communicate that, and also understand that from your teams. They need different things. That doesn't mean one is more confident or less confident. It's just maybe being expressed in a little bit different way.
Beautiful. So it sounds like confidence is comfort rather than being on the stage and look how much of a showman I am.
Sort of, yeah. And also maybe being slightly uncomfortable in the comfort space and that challenge zone. So I think a great thing is a really confident person can say, I don't know, or I've messed up, taking accountability, being, it's like going on stage. It's great to feel a little bit nervous, have that acute stress. It actually sharpens you slightly. So when I work with clients around presentation coaching, for example, and I've got a leader saying, hey, I've got to do a speech in front of 4,000 customers in 3 months, and I really can't do this. Okay, it's not about getting rid of nerves or never having that small moment. It's like, no, let's embrace that, because it's also how we label it. Nerves, excitement, fear all come up physiologically very similar. So let's label it. Let's see it as kind of that turbo boost to sharpening our mindset, getting out there, being present, doing it, and then being like, wow, I did it. I was nervous, but I did it, so I can do it again. And it's just that iteration that we bring.
I love that. So how do there'll be a lot of introverted leaders listening to this. How do they make their impact? How do they lead in the best way possible?
I think first is understanding your personal preferences and how you work best personally, right? So a great thing, and something that crops up especially when working with sales teams, for example, is the good old brainstorming concept in meetings. Now, brainstorming is great for people who, maybe more like me, need to talk their ideas out in order to get to the end point. Now, for someone, and this is sort of talking in a Myers-Briggs term of introversion and extroversion, but if someone with more an introversion preference, they do all of that on the inside, so we don't see it, and then they will verbalize the end product. Now, if you have a brainstorming session that's just popped in the diary, no agenda, nothing like that, meeting, now you're going, okay, everyone, now we're going to brainstorm about strategy for 2025-26. Now, for people who haven't had the time to prepare, reflect, and the same if you're an introverted leader or someone who maybe finds that situation a little bit intimidating, you're not going to get the best out of your people. So simple things like pop in meeting agendas, do those, prepare people, right, on Friday, let's do it this way. We're going to do a brainstorming session with the goal of thinking about our top 3 strategies for 2025-26, for example. Give people time. Not everyone will need that. Some people will. So why not cover bases and make sure we're really elevating everyone?
I love that. So it feels like preparation and understanding the individuals throughout your team.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about resilience.
Yeah.
So it's a word that comes up, and in sales interviews, it's tell me about yourself, and people say, I'm so resilient, and then 3 months later, they're crying on the kitchen floor. So what's your feelings towards resilience?
Yeah, and I think it's great because I think confidence, resilience, happiness, success, all of these words we use all the time without taking any moment to think about what does it actually mean to us and to others. So with resilience, so I'm a resilience dynamic coach, and they have a wonderful definition of resilience, which is that it's adapting, the ability to adapt to change without the loss of performance or well-being. So it's not this view that sometimes we can have that resilience is just kind of plodding on no matter what, gritting our teeth and being like, I just have to get through this. No, it's about how can we increase our capacity to adapt without it being detrimental. So there are kind of 3 key principles of that is one around being present, being a little bit more present, so that kind of mindfulness aspect. One is learning. So when we're constantly in this learning mindset, we're actually increasing our own capability for resilience, which also feeds into confidence and our success and mindset perspective. That is a whole topic I could speak to you for another hour on. And then also finally energy. So not just physical energy, but also mental energy. So for example, going back to what does your leader do in order to get the best out of their teams? So there's research done that we have a really, well, not really limited, but we have a limited mental capacity. And kind of, so if you think of it like a coin purse that you start every day with, and every task that you do takes a certain number of coins. So by the end of the day, you've maybe spent everything, which means if you're planning, how do I best serve myself, serve my team, planning strategy sessions or really in-depth meetings where you need everyone to be super sharp on their game at 4 p.m. on a Friday is doing no one any favors. So it's thinking, okay, how can we adapt to know that mental energy is most in the morning? So do those big tasks, do those strategic tasks then, and then map the rest of your day around it. So you're thinking about these and therefore increasing your capability of resilience and reducing that potential for burnout and overwhelm.
Beautiful. So there's been a lot of talk about authenticity so far in this conversation. And it's one of those things that I wonder about because we have a lot of people from psychology backgrounds and things like that. And even things like values, so selecting some values that appear a positive thing can be a signaling thing. I want people to know I am resilient rather than actually be resilient. Like if you couldn't tell anyone about those values, would you still have them? So in your experience, how hard is it to get people to see themselves as they actually are rather than as they think they need to appear to be?
I think that's a great question. Do you know what? It's interesting because it can suddenly happen in the coaching space. And I think that's because the coaching space is a safe, confidential space that is no judgment. So me as your coach, we're equal partners. I'm not higher or lower. It's that equality, that open transparency. And people, as you picked up there, it sometimes can be difficult to break out of perceptive or perception of who we are, our world, all of that. And I think once someone allows themselves to step into that space and say, okay, actually, this is my moment, it's safe, nothing's coming out of here that I don't want to take out, then yeah, you can have those moments. And actually something that I like, so I bring quite a lot of games into my coaching because I was thinking they're a lot more fun and I've got a lot of these kinds of tools from the various trainings and stuff. And there was this one leader who was very, very cerebral, very much in his thoughts, and was going through a lot of change at the company, taking on a whole new team as well, and really, really stuck. And what we did was we played a game called Spaces, which is because he had several different roads that he could go down at this point. And Spaces is moving around the room, and you go into a different space depending on which avenue. So if it's staying at the particular company, if it's a promotion, if it's looking elsewhere, you go into a different space for each. And you go into how you're feeling when you move into that space. And it's one of those things that when you say it, he was like, okay, I'll give it a go. I'm like, okay, let's just try it and see, absolutely no stress if it's not connecting. But as soon as he allowed himself to move into that space, and I was actually like, what do you feel here? And did, fun things like, okay, if you were a piece of clothing in this space, what would it be? Okay, interesting. Tell me more about that. That kind of thing. And really surprise him to get out of being up here in his head and come down. He had that clear answer of which path was right for him because he felt it for the first time. And that was just amazing to see because it's shaking someone out of maybe their usual pattern.
Is that quite typical for you then when you sit down with a client that there's a uncomfortability around putting yourself even in that situation? Is it typical you've got to put them in that spot to get somewhere?
No, not always. I mean, as I said, coaching works when someone's ready for it. And I think sometimes there's, I'm ready for it, but I'm not quite sure what it is, but I think I'm ready. And, you can get those moments, or I'm ready for it. Oh, it's slightly more challenging than maybe I thought it would be, but this is great. But really, the majority of my clients are here to work to be challenged. And, sometimes I'll ask at the beginning of the session, how much challenge are you up for today? We up for the loving boot, which is kind of what coaching can be. Or is it like, actually I've had a lot and I just need to get everything out of my head and then I'll be able to see how much challenge I'm up for kind of situation. So it's really keeping that nice, honest communication in because I go where the client goes. And that's the key thing, rather than me trying to drag them and be like, hey, I want to do a fun game today. So the next client I have, I'm going to make them play constellations or spaces or any of these other things that I love doing.
I love that space example. I think that's really, really powerful and something that people should be exploring. One thing I've been exploring at the moment, I've been chewing Zach's ear off about it, is like decision making is very binary. So when you were talking about spaces there, typically as human beings, it's very easy to say, should I do this or that? Should I leave my job? Should I stay in my job? Whereas actually we forget that there's probably many different spaces that you can actually go and work in. So when you're working and coaching people, how do you get them to open up their mind to maybe not think about things in such a binary manner?
Well, I think the powerful thing about coaching is it's open-ended questions, which definitely is why I think being a trained coach is good, because it is so easy as someone in a conversation to ask closed questions of, oh, did you like that? Yes, no. Oh, what other option? And so you've really got to go into those open questions. And actually, one of the most powerful tools is silence. And that can be sometimes uncomfortable to hold. But there are these moments where, a client says something, and it's so tempting within me to be like, oh, ask the next great question, and be like, what a great question, Beth, that was really good. But then I'm like, no, okay, hold back just for maybe 2 seconds. And then I've seen it where there's suddenly been a shift, and they've kept on talking and gone down, and really just opened that up. And I think that's something really interesting for leaders in general, not just as a coach or anything like that, but especially maybe when we're in that leadership position. And the difference, I guess, between being a leader and being a manager is actually silence can be one of your most powerful tools. Holding back. Don't solve everything for them, for your direct employee. Give them a second, ask them questions. What worked well? How can we do more of it? What would you like to try differently? What's and how questions, and see what difference that makes.
Beautiful. So beautiful. So we spoke a little bit about resilience, and resilience has got an ugly stepbrother that goes by the name of rejection. So when you think about your life and your career and things like that, what kind of rejections have you maybe experienced that actually, when you look back at the time, they might have been difficult, but you've turned them into something profitable? You've gained, you've learned from them. What are some of the things that spring to mind, Beth?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I think a key mindset shift is looking at failures or mistakes or anything like that, rejection, as all of those things, and that's bad and we're awful people. But actually, it's a learning experience. And if we see it as learning, then fab. I mean, if I think, back in my career, there's been tons of times when I haven't got the job that I thought I would have wanted. And I remember one time, because I really wanted to leave the job that I was in at the time, my dad had come up to London to take me out for coffee, and I'd got this call being like, hi, yeah, you didn't get it. And I just remember crying on the tube with my dad when I was 23 or something. And it's one of those things I can't even remember what job that was. And it's one of, it didn't matter, because I actually ended up handing in my resignation anyway and getting a job I did want that came up 3 months later. So all of these things work out. And so I guess one of the biggest learnings of my life was 2017, which was the worst year of my life. But looking back, absolutely the best year of my life. Because at the beginning of it, so my ex and I broke up. So it was coming out of a long-term relationship where we were engaged and living together and all that. So the detanglement of that, and then I got made redundant, which I was in HR at the time, so I had to write my own letter, which is a humbling moment. And all of this, and that all made me finally face PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder from assault from years ago that I'd repressed. And having to go through all of that and really look at how much my mindset and my confidence was broken, and I would definitely say broken. Like if I think about how I thought and how I talked to myself in my own head, it was horrible. I'd never talked to my worst enemy the way that I talked to myself back then. And I had to rebuild all of that using, the tools and stuff that I now use with clients. And if I hadn't gone through that, I would never have got into coaching. I wouldn't have started my own business. So I started my own business at the end of 2017. I wouldn't have built my self-worth up and my values, that meant that when I met my now husband, I was like, hi, this is my values. This is what I want from a relationship. Like, take it or leave it. But I think we'd be great together. And I wouldn't have had any of the opportunities. If I think back, God, I'm so grateful to my ex for us breaking up, because everything changed from that moment. And I wouldn't have my business, my clients, coaching, my lovely husband and my son, and all of this stuff. My life would be completely different, and it would probably be quite tragic. So it's one of those things of, I am filled with gratitude looking back, but I remember how that felt, even though it kind of feels like a different person now.
Wow. Thank you for being so open.
Well, thank you for allowing me.
I think that's really powerful, because your clients and your confidence in delivering for those clients comes from you've been on the same journey and been able to transform and work for it. Do you think, going back to confidence, that's where your confidence comes from? This is a journey you've actually been on, so you're comfortable recognizing all the uncomfortable parts.
Exactly. And I think when I set up my business, so yeah, it was the end of 2017. So I'd done all this personal work, I'd built myself up, and then I worked for a company that was really toxic. And so I remember thinking, why am I here? I know what I want. I've done so much therapy and good work. Like, what is the point? So handed my notice in, and I was like, okay, setting up my own business, going to be an executive coach. I'm going to do this, because I will call myself a success, and it'll be successful if I help one person that's like me. And that was my goal back in 2017 when I started. And yeah, to think about what the opportunities I've had, it's been amazing. And I'm looking forward to seeing what else comes in the future.
And that actually highlights something that me and Jack talk about all the time. This idea of expectations tend to be equal happiness. So expectations meets reality. Somewhere between there is what the happiness is.
Yeah.
How often do you think people's self-doubt or unhappiness actually comes from misaligned expectations?
Oh, definitely a lot. But I would also say that it comes from the fact that we do not notice everything amazing in the everyday. And this comes from someone who, has had PTSD, has sometimes anxiety and things like that. So there is so much research. So I have a master's in neuroscience and psychology of mental health. And there is so much research around how practicing gratitude or self-kindness or optimism, not toxic positivity or anything like that, but actually just noticing all of these little things in our everyday, have such positive correlation to physical health, mental well-being, and self-regard. So it's in our best interest to start putting our energy into, oh, actually, what have I done well today? What am I grateful for today? I make myself a lovely coffee every morning. Also, I generally buy an artisanal bougie little coffee every morning, and I'm like, yay me! That's great. That makes me feel good. It's one of those things of like, yeah, I'm going to notice that, maybe I have a nice chat with the barista. Maybe I smile at someone, or just floof on in and go about my day. But it's noticing those really small things. And that is what make the fundamental difference, because happiness is here. Confidence is here. Success is here. Resilience is here. Now, to varying degrees, yes. And fluctuation, of course. But you have it now. Not as soon as I get a promotion or this and that. It's now. And once you realize that and you put in the energy into realizing that, your growth is unlimited.
Love that. let's flip it then, Beth, because I'm always a big fan of inverting it, and I
Mhm.
always like to see what the counter is. So let's say self-doubt. What in a world in what world can that actually be productive for us then?
Yeah, I mean, there's that side. It depends because it's whether things are holding us back or whether things are flagging an opportunity for learning. And that is perspective and mindset. So if you're in a mindset of learning challenges as opportunities, so one of the key things when I'm doing like leadership workshops and thinking about feedback is rather than criticism, feedback should be action orientated. And if you flip it into or invert it, just so you're nice and happy there. So if you invert it into rather than a failure or you're not doing this, you need to do XYZ, but rather, hey, there's an opportunity for you to do more of, or an opportunity to do X differently, that's way more motivating. That's way more engaging for you and your team. That's how you're going to get the difference out of someone and yourself as well. So, yes, self doubt, can it help us? It depends on how we're approaching it. Are we approaching it as, oh, thank you for flagging this great learning opportunity? Yep, I maybe just need to check myself. Okay, no, let's give it a go. Or, yeah, actually, maybe that is slightly too much of a challenge right now. But what I can do is this, which will help me grow a little bit and a little bit more until I can get to that level that I want to get to. Fab. If it's holding us back and saying, you can never do that, never, not good enough, that kind of inner critic side, then that's not going to be as productive for you.
Good. I like it. So you've alluded a few times to this toolbox, and when I think of a toolbox in the shed, I think you could have lots and lots of different tools that you look at and think, I don't even know what that is. But in a trusty toolbox, you're going to have a hammer, a screwdriver, and a spanner. So when you think of like the most common tools that you use and you bring to coaching sessions that you know this is going to get the most out of people, this is my go-to, this is my favorite, this is something that's so powerful that I wish the whole world knew, what are those?
Great question. I think so. First and foremost is the language that we use. So, language creates our reality. So, if you actually start to listen to yourself, you'll start to hear your patterns. Where are you undermining yourself? Something that I picked a client up on the other day is they'd say these really profound, deep things and then say, does that make sense at the end of it? Yes, that makes sense. And it's one of those kind of crutches where we can just take our legs out and you're like, why are you doing that? Come on. No, it makes sense. It's brilliant. It's powerful. Just let yourself enjoy it. But it's those sorts of things. So think about the language. When we start, kind of a common trap is using permanent language, always, never. I will always be bad at this. I will never be able to go and speak on a stage in front of people or lead a team or have my own business. When we start to do that, challenge it with evidence, not feeling. Feeling is not fact. Evidence is fact. And when you start thinking, oh, well, I know that, Zach thinks this about me. Well, how do you know what he thinks? That's a projection. If he has said, you are not good at X and Y, okay, that's an opinion. And we can work with that in some way, shape, or form. Where's the evidence for it? Where's the proof? All of that. So really try and be kind of judge and jury of your own inner workings and your own inner critic to reframe it and make it more confident. So that's language. The basics, breathing. Never underestimate breathing. And you're like, oh my God, this woman is coming in here telling me to breathe. Like, what on earth? But there is actually a lot of really great research that shows how we can kind of hack our mind with breathing. So, for example, inhaling for 4 and exhaling for 8. So your exhale's twice as long as your inhale. That can help activate our parasympathetic nervous system. So the parasympathetic is like the brake pedal to the fight, flight, freeze, right? So the parasympathetic, it calms everything down. It starts to lower that heart rate, lower that blood pressure, just so breathing. Great, because It's everywhere with you, wherever you go. It's free. It's also really subtle to do in meetings or on stage. If you're on Zoom, everyone just sees your shoulders. Try and do deep tummy breaths, and that will really help calm things down. And then the absolute fundamental is eat, sleep, and move. It's my favorite concept in neuroscience, which is adult hippocampal neurogenesis, which is just a fancy way of saying new brain cells. So they found that we actually do keep making new brain cells throughout adulthood, which was something that previously they kind of thought we stopped. But things like sleeping well, good nutrition, and movement all increase the production of your new brain cells. Now, things like cortisol, which comes from stress, inhibits this process for a long time. So long cortisol, not acute stress. And then eventually it starts to kill the brain cells, which I realize makes you more stressed if you're already a bit stressed about that. But so it's just thinking, okay, how can I do these really small basic things? Simplicity, and that will then help you grow to be able to level up.
Beautiful, powerful. I want to just keep talking about language that you mentioned there a bit more. I've been thinking about this quite a lot. I've got young boys, and I think, whether this is right or wrong, and I'm sure people are going to tell me off for this, that we speak to boys in a very certain way that then becomes almost ingrained as they grow up. So we say things like smash it, destroy it. It's all very like aggressive language from the outset. And then we wonder why you get people who, when they start repressing those emotions, it tends to come out in negative traits. So how much of these language patterns are picked up in childhood and then become problematic in adult years?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I agree with you. We really need to watch, and especially I've got a nearly 2-year-old. So, very much really trying to praise like effort and be like, great concentration, baby, rather than like, good job, you succeeded. It's a work in progress. But it takes me back. So I do quite a lot of inner critic work. I love the inner critic. I think it's really fascinating and such a great opportunity for us to make real change. And it takes me back to one client I was working with years ago. We were doing this inner critic work where I tried to help someone kind of pull the inner critic out as a separate person. The inner critic, your inner monologue, is not you. And I think when you realize that makes a big change and a big step forward in helping to balance that and see them as constructive, but if we're not quite there yet, at least a little less destructive. And so we were doing this work in the session, and they suddenly stopped and went, "Oh my God, it's my dance teacher from when I was 5." And that was the inner critic voice in their head when they really pulled it out and saw them, heard them, could hear their voice. It was instant. And that was a fascinating moment. So we've got to think, how do we talk to ourselves? How are we talking to others? Because there are some very interesting studies, and one which is very unethical. It was done back in the 1930s. Have you ever heard of the monster study? Oh, so it was where they took orphan boys, and some of them had stutters already, some of them didn't. And the ones that didn't, they made them think that they did. So they did things like interrupt them or point out every time they made a little mistake when they were reading, to the point where they actually induced stutters in several of the boys that didn't have it. Now, a slightly more positive study about kind of how we can influence not only ourselves but others, and especially think about this as leaders, what language are we using to ourselves, to our team, is there was another study more recently where they took cleaners of big hotels, and half the cleaners, they said, hey, the amount of work you do in your average day is actually the equivalent of going to the gym and you're smashing I use the word smashing. There we go. You're smashing the exercise goals that the government say you need. You are more than completing that in the work that you're doing. And the other group of cleaners, they didn't say anything to. And over a 4-week period, what they saw were the cleaners who now were told, hey, the work I do is actually more than fulfilling my exercise quota. They lost weight, their blood pressure went down, and that was without changing any other lifestyle, just the mindset of, oh, the work I do is fulfilling exercise quotas. And that had that like physical effect on our bodies. So the language you use, how you're affecting it, whether it's from childhood to now, be aware of your own things, be aware of our own baggage. Okay, let's meet it. Let's deal with it. Let's not hide it away, because it has a great opportunity to always pop up when we least want it to. But then also, let's not try and induce that in other people.
That's a really terrifying study. I didn't know that. I'm going to have nightmares about that, I think.
Yeah, back in the 1930s.
Yeah, may it stay there.
Exactly.
So just touched on that then. So from what you know about neuroscience, this inner critic part of us, does it have a function? Is there a reason that it's there?
Yeah, I think the inner critic, if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, was the voice that when we stumbled out the cave in the morning, there's a rustling or something's not quite right in the environment. Is it a tiger or a rabbit? That was useful then. It's very quick at picking up those negatives or those not quite right things and flagging them. Now, obviously, we're hopefully not in the cave tiger rabbit situation now. And so it's got a bit off balance where it can really just take that negative bias and run with it. Now, the mistake I think we make is not challenging it, of accepting it. And I know I definitely did that, and clients do that. Because it's in our head, we think it's us, it's true, it's our thoughts. No. So there have been some research that says, and take this with a pinch of salt because I think it's quite hard to fully be able to research, but there are around 60,000 thoughts a day, and about 90% of those are the same as yesterday. So it's so easy to get into these cycles and just keep perpetuating these negative cycles that we're in. So what we want to do is, if you think of your thoughts like a river running down a hill, it takes the path of least resistance. So if we keep just letting the water flow in these negative ways, it's not going to change, it's going to ingrain, it's going to erode and get deeper. So what we need to do is take our spade and actively make these new synaptic connections. Neuroplasticity, we can do that. You do have the power to change your mindset, to change your thinking, and eventually change your beliefs. It takes work, it takes consistency, but small, consistent steps, fundamental change. And you can do that.
Beth, I've absolutely loved this conversation. It's been amazing. I've taken so much away from it already. I want to get it on Spotify now so I can re-listen back to it. I'll ask you one last question before we let you go. If somebody is in the mindset of I want to change, not I need to. I don't want to, after that conversation on language, I'd be an idiot to say I need to. I want to change. I feel like I'm ready to change. What book would you recommend that they maybe go out and explore first?
Oh, that is a fabulous question. What a spanner in the works. I think it depends about where you're at and what change are you thinking about. Is this a fulfillment change, who am I kind of thing? I could absolutely shamelessly plug my dear dad's book, which is Managing Your Mind, which is all, the third edition is positive psychology. So it's very much framed in these ways. It goes into as soon as mindsets and all of that. I think a really fabulous coaching book is Time to Think by Nancy Klein. It's got that amazing difference on problem solving. It really opens you up to all those different things. A book I just thoroughly enjoyed was the Netflix No Rules Rules, just as a way to think about organizational change in a bit of a different way to what we normally see. So absolutely tons of fantastic books there. Yeah. Oh, that's a great question.
Nice. Good answer. If people want to work with you, check you out, find you, get in touch with you, how do they do that?
So you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Beth Hope, or you can go to my website, which is andhope, so ANDHOPE.co.uk.
Beautiful. Thank you so
Amazing.
much for joining us today. It's been an
Thank
incredible
you.
conversation.
Thanks.
Thank
It's
you,
been
Beth.
lovely having you. Thank you.